So hey, how you doing? I'm Daryl O'Donnell. I'm going to be kind of documenting over the next probably, I guess, a year, a big shift in my business, but that's not the story here. The story here is a big shift that's happening in digital identity. I'm on my way to a camping trip. The whole idea of this trip is we're just going to sit around and not have much technology and just enjoy the company of a few people, some old university friends and their co-workers. And identity is so easy for us when we're face to face. It's so simple that we learn how to trust someone. We can learn that if other people trust people, we can move that across and start to believe that we can trust them, and then we get reinforcements or trust disappears. And people know who we are. We have an identity. We have various different identities. We're different people to ourselves. We're different people to our families, even inside the family, as a kid, as a parent, as a brother, as a lover. We're just different people. We have different versions of our identity. But in the digital world, things are upside down. I don't have an identity. I do not have a digital identity. Facebook has an identity for me, as does Google, as does my bank, as does the government. But I don't have an identity, at least up until very, very recent times. There's a concept now called self-sovereign identity that, in my opinion, and what I'm basically betting my whole career on, is it is going to turn the internet and many other technologies, just about every technology I can think of, upside down. The whole concept here is that I will, just like I do in the real world, own and control the boundaries of my identity. That doesn't mean I own and control everything. I don't own my passport. The government issues me my passport. I don't, I guess I may own my birth certificate, but they're the ones who created it and swore to it, and that I was born and that is me. But in the digital world, it's upside down, as I mentioned. Facebook sees me as a product. A good friend of mine, German Reed, says that basically if you look at something that's free, if something is free, odds are pretty good that you are the product. You are what Facebook is selling. What happens though when I own my own digital identity and I can start establishing my relationship with the government? I can establish my relationship with you more directly as opposed to using Facebook Messenger. Or even the crazy parts of just logging in to different websites. It's great you can use Facebook to log in, Google to log in, but they're tracking you. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not a crypto anarchist or anything, but I would like to understand how they're deriving all the value, but more importantly, I'd like to have a little more influence on what's going on. So I'm totally fine with giving away some of my privacy for benefit. But digital identity, specifically self-sovereign identity, is going to be turning things around. The biggest shift that's happening, I think, in the near term, because this is a long horizon. I think 5-10 years from now, we're going to look back at, what 2017 is about digital identity, and Facebook and Google and Amazon, everybody owning my identity, and look back and it's kind of a quaint and strange concept. Because if you look at the root of it, no company really, barring the advertisers, no company wants to own my identity. It's actually a liability. Take a look at Equifax and every other breach. Yahoo with over 1 billion, Equifax with 143 million customers. We're not customers of Equifax, we're the product. The customers of Equifax are the banks. They're the ones who buy a version of our identity that we have very little influence over. I mean, you can hire lawyers and stuff if you can afford it to try and fix your credit rating if it's looking a little skewed. But what happens when a company doesn't need to own my identity? And this is where it's really interesting. We're seeing education, banks, companies of all natures, governments, looking at the fact that, hang on a sec, if I don't need to own Daryl's identity, what does it mean if Daryl owns his own identity, and how do I interface with him? Well, why do they want to own my identity right now? Why? Because they need to figure out who I am. They need to get me logged into their system and interacting with them in some way. But do they need to have my date of birth, my social insurance number, my address, all that information, which is now literally a financial liability. In Europe, I mean, GDPR and stuff is going to rock. It is already rocking the foundations of what do I do? What is customer data versus what is private information? What's the company's information? It's huge. But if you flip it around and I simply log into your system and I prove that I am, in the context of our business relationship, who I say I am, everything changes. Companies no longer have to hold all this information. I don't have to give away everything. They don't want it. They don't want to know my date of birth, because if they accidentally release it, they are now liable for suing. And what do they really need to know? Just that I am who I say I am. We can figure that out in other different ways. I can, as I walk up to you and show you ID, if I need to get that formal a relationship, you need to look and say, okay, cool, it's real ID. That's a real driver's license. It's issued and it says his name is Daryl O'Donnell. He lives at this address and stuff. I've got a question why you need my address. But we can do that in the real world, but we are just now beginning to be able to do that digitally. So companies are some are flailing around, some are looking and wondering how can they flip this equation on its head. And that's what I'm going to be working on, because we're working on some technologies. Biggest one in the market right now, in my opinion, is Sovereign, SOVRIN. Sovereign is open source, it's an open network, and it's allowing me to begin, it's just the very beginning times, this is for geeks and for people who want to catch the trends before they become huge tsunami-like waves. What does it mean to reestablish that relationship so that I become the locus of control of my own identity? There are technologies, but every technology needs to have adoption. So what I'm working on, whether that's being as an investor or now as a boutique sort of consultancy, what does it mean to a government? What does it mean to a telecommunications company? What does it mean to a bank, to a university, to a person? When I can assert who I am, you can look me up and sort of build a digital trust. The terms they use is a digital trust graph. All that means is there's more and more reinforcing points. If somebody tells you, this guy's not trustworthy, and another person tells you this person's not trustworthy, odds are after you hear it enough, maybe they're not trustworthy. But similarly, if you have enough systems saying, you know what, Airbnb, this person has rented 11 times, had 5 out of 5 ratings, their Uber rating is 4.75 over 100 rides, all these things start to add up. If you start to look into the reputation of somebody who's commenting and providing ideas on YouTube or blogging, you start to build this reputation. Twitter, number of Twitter followers, number of likes on Facebook, all that kind of stuff sort of adds up to become a virtual trust. You can infer real trust from that, but you have to own your identity. You have to own your own identity in order to get that. So companies are looking at the fact that, hang on, if I don't need to own my identity right now, if you look inside of companies, organizations, even governments, education institutions, hospitals, healthcare, owning my identity is a real liability. Identity systems are a cost, they're an expense. Nobody other than the advertising groups refer to identity as a revenue generator. But what if it became one? What if I could establish an even more trusted relationship with the brands, the companies that I identify with, that I work with? What changes then? That's where things start to get really interesting. So I just wanted to start that off, and what you're going to be hearing from me is a couple little clips. There'll be probably some videos, definitely some writing. I'm working on projects that, largely speaking, are very open. These are people who are clearly thought leaders. They see where things are going in a vague idea. They have a rough idea of the direction. Nobody knows where this is going in the next 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, but we know that things are shifting. So hopefully you can ride along and we can take this concept, and again, I'm going to see these guys I haven't seen in a couple of years, camping with them, and reestablishing that trust, that relationship that we still maintain. And yeah, we all use Facebook, we stay in touch, and so I have no problem with Facebook and all that type of stuff, but what is changing is that relationship that I can have all over the place and start to become more human again on the internet, and how it applies to everything. So hopefully you'll just enjoy the journey, and well, we'll see where this one goes. Thanks.